Thank you. Cool.
Awesome. Thank you guys for coming on this wonderful hot Saturday. Unseasonably hot. I am Ingrid LaFleur. I'm the Chief Community Officer at EOS Detroit. And we are a block producer for the blockchain EOS. And we are now hosting Jess Houlgrave, who is with SHEOS, part of the EOS family. We're very happy to have her here. And she's going to be talking about SHEOS, I hope a little bit of Codex, and what other wonderful blockchain beauty things.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me today. It's I've come all the way from London, not specifically for this. I was actually in New York last week, and we'll be in Toronto next week. And so this has just been the most perfect timing for me to come through Detroit and speak to you all. And thanks to Ingrid, who hosted me for a lovely Blockchain Babes Who brunch this morning, which was great to meet some of Detroit's women in blockchain, and we had a great lunch, and Ingrid has been the most wonderful host today, and for the 24 hours that I have in Detroit, shown me a whole bunch of stuff, and it's been awesome to see how thriving this city is. And I have to say, I'm really pleasantly surprised. I had no idea how energetic it would be, and how much art and culture I would get to see while I was here. So I've had just the nicest day. And now here I am having a glass of wine with you all, so it literally couldn't be better. So SHEOS is, as Ingrid said, a block producer candidate for the EOS blockchain. And I'm super happy to answer questions as we go along, so please interrupt me. But EOS is kind of a unique blockchain because it's the first real implemented mainnet of a delegated proof of stake network where people are putting their beliefs and their philosophy on the line and trying to win votes from people in order to be the block producers that are supporting that network. The blockchains that have come before, Ethereum, Bitcoin, there's nothing. If you want to be a block producer, you can. And this is a little different, and that's kind of why I love EOS as a network and the community that is around EOS, because people really believe in it, and they're willing to think about what they believe in and stand up for it and make a difference. And that's kind of what inspired me to get involved with SHEOS, and why I'm here today, and I guess probably why all of you are here today as well. And so it's a real privilege to be part of such an awesome community. Kind of briefly on my personal background, I got into crypto in 2015. A friend of mine, an old roommate from college, was investing and coding and stuff that was way beyond me. I have a finance background and had been in banking for a while. And he said, you have to check this out, it's really cool. And so I put a tiny amount of money in, just enough to kind of make sure that I was interested, and boy was I interested. And about 2 months later I just quit my job because I was like, this space is happening, this is where the future is. And I was so overwhelmingly excited about it that I took a two-week vacation over my Christmas break and didn't spend any time with my family, spent most of it watching YouTube videos and listening to podcasts, and arrived back into work on the 3rd of January. And after about 3 hours, decided that was it. And I walked into my boss's office and I was like, I'm out of here. And so that was how I kind of started my blockchain and crypto journey. And I spent some time, I wrote a master's thesis paper on the applications of blockchain technology for the art world. We've worked with artists and businesses, auction houses like Sotheby's over the last couple of years, helping them to think about and implement blockchain technologies. And then I founded a company last year called Codex, which is a blockchain company that develops non-fungible tokens, so unique tokens that can be used to represent real-world assets like art and fine wine and things like that, and help prove authenticity and provenance of those items. And so so Codex is my first endeavor as a founder, and Shios is my second. And I'll tell you a little bit more about Shios, and obviously happy to answer any other questions and things as we go. But we are the first female-founded block producer on EOS, and we're 10 women from all around the world. And most of us have known each other for a couple of years now. We range from engineers like Crystal, Naomi, who is an ER doctor but spends her spare time teaching girls how to code, Pamela and Sandy, who are long-standing finance professionals and run crypto funds, Viv, who's a DJ, one half of Blondish, which is a DJ duo, but has spent kind of the last few years trying to develop blockchain tools for the music industry. Nicole, who was at Coinbase, Maya Vujinovic, women who have really kind of thrown themselves into it, and who've come from a real range of backgrounds. And one of the things that I think we all have in common is that we've sort of been through not being the norm. We've been women who have been in tech industries and finance industries where there's like not that many women. And we've always spoken about kind of how we want to get more women into tech. And we did a research program, actually before Shios kind of started, a few of us were thinking about how we could improve women in tech and encourage more girls to get into tech. And we did this kind of small piece of research and commissioned a report, and we interviewed girls at age 11, 13, and 16. And if you talk to girls who are age 13 and between 11 and 13, like 75% of them are interested in coding. They're interested in technology, they're interested in science, engineering, mathematics. They kind of know that this is the future. And then you talk to them at 16 and they don't want to do it anymore. They're not interested. Like 5% of girls at age 16 are interested in tech and STEM subjects. And so something happens. Something happens between age 11 and age 16, which changes their minds. And it's social. It's social conditioning. It's the fact that it isn't cool. It's what their peers think. It's what their teachers think, what their educators think and say to them. And so that's what Shios is around. It is about promoting and enabling girls to feel comfortable in technology businesses and to really drive that forward. Our infrastructure is really exciting too. That's what being a block producer is ultimately about is providing, supporting infrastructure for the EOS network. We have a data center in Iceland and run all our own bare metal racks and everything like that. And I can talk about that, but it's probably not the most exciting part about Shios. So I'm just going to very quickly let you see the other ladies who can't be here today. This is a couple minutes, and it's a good way to see.
I'm Jess Houlgrave, and I am Shios.
I am Emily Bush, and I am Shios.
Hi, I'm Vivian, and I am Shios.
I'm Nicole Boyar, and I am Shios.
I'm Pamela Day, and I'm Shios too.
I'm Jess Houlgrave, and I am Shios.
I'm Sandy Hill, and I'm Shios.
I'm Shauna Lane Devon, and I am Shios.
I am Maya Vujinovic, and yes, I am Shios.
I am Naomi, and I am Shios.
We are Shios.
We are
Shios.
Shios.
The first
Female-founded
Block
producer.
Block producer.
on the EOS.
EOS
network.
EOS Network.
We are an international group.
International.
国际
Of exceedingly talented
technologists
And entrepreneurs.
Engineers, technologists, and entrepreneurs.
We believe.
We believe
EOS
and blockchain technology
和区块链技术
Have the power to
change the
World.
Change the world.
改变世界
We are committed
To
committed
our responsibility responsibility.
As your custodian,
We are custodians
of the EOS network.
Belongs to you.
You.
Our dedicated infrastructure runs
on bare metal racks.
Bare metal.
highly
secure.
State-of-the-art
Data center in Iceland.
We know how to do this.
What makes us different?
Different from the others.
We think.
It's a privilege to give back.
Giving enriches community.
Giving back enriches us.
It's a responsibility we've taken to heart.
We are responsible
To the EOS community.
EOS.
SHIOS builds community.
Yep.
we have a plan.
We're building a broad-based educational program.
All are welcome at our global meetups.
Gatherings where anyone can learn.
EOS Meetups, sponsored by SHIOS.
And we are really proud of this.
SHIOS scholarships that will be awarded to girls.
In marginalized second and third world countries.
Education.
Girls.
Girls and young women.
Learn to code.
Technical education.
We are sponsoring scholarships for girls.
我们给女孩们提供奖学金。
Girls grow into women.
Strong, capable women.
Capable and literate women empower whole societies.
Everyone benefits from the education of women.
Everyone benefits.
SHIOS makes the world a better place.
Shields.
SHIOS.
So that is SHIOS, and we're really passionate about this idea of giving back. And so one of the most exciting things that we're doing today, here we go, let's make this bigger, is really working to promote young girls getting involved in technology. We've established the SHIOS Foundation, whose primary purpose is to award SHIOS scholarships to women and young girls. As we said in the video, we're starting with developing countries, countries where those girls maybe don't have access to either the funds that are needed or particularly to the social ability to access those classes. There was an article a while ago in which a female educator, a technical educator, coder, was given a list of people who'd signed up and to her class, and it was all men. And she said to the organizer, like, why is it all guys? And he said, oh, well, there were only 3 girls, so we took them off and we put them into the childcare class. And like, these kinds of things are the norm. Girls are discouraged and excluded from this kind of education. And that's something that we feel really passionate about. So a proportion of all the funds and revenue that SHIOS makes goes to awarding SHIOS scholarships to girls in developing countries. We are really excited to announce a pilot program with a scholarship, an education, technical education group in Bulgaria, where we will put girls through coding school for the next year. And as EOS and SHIOS grows, we'll continue to drive funds into those causes. These are our events for the next few months. One of the great things about the team is that we are truly international. I live in London. We have women in New York, Los Angeles, China, and we really believe that EOS is the blockchain that is crossing the cultural divide, that people all over the world are getting excited about. And you only have to look at block producers like EOS Nairobi and many of the block producers in Asia and see the reception and the interaction between the community to see that this is really transcending this kind of cultural divide and bringing people together to try and make a difference. This is Sandy Hill, who is one of my co-founders, who runs or is a driving force behind the foundation, who really believes that educating women can empower whole societies. And it might seem like an obvious thing to suggest, but when women are educated and have economic freedom, they enable everybody to make better choices, to do better things for their children, to do better things for their community, and I think a really indicative societies where women have equal access to education are really moving the whole world forward, and we want to encourage that everywhere. So you can connect with us online. One of the things that is not on the slides, but that I'm really happy to be able to give you a sneak preview of today, is a new app that we're releasing, which is called we think it's going to be called the SHIOS EOS 21 protocol, and it is an application which will facilitate the easier movement from Ethereum to EOS. Growing the EOS community and the EOS blockchain is really key to the success of the platform. And for a long time, Ethereum has been the only blockchain of choice for many new projects in the blockchain space. And switching costs are hard. Once you've developed a product, it can be very hard to then go back and change a bunch of stuff. And we saw, even with the launch of the EOS mainnet, how difficult that can be to transition from Ethereum onto another platform, in this case its own mainnet, but nevertheless, it can be a very challenging process. And so the EOS protocol, the 21 protocol, will be released in the next couple of weeks. And will facilitate cross-chain movement by using a black hole contract, which can accept an EOS public address to send new tokens to. And so that's something that I think we're super excited about, and more details about it will be released over the next couple of weeks. But I think we're really hopeful that projects who are currently built on Ethereum, who maybe are unsatisfied with it, or who are excited to try something new, or maybe even at the outset just want to have a backup to what they already have, and investigate the options for switching, might engage with as a way to push this whole community one step forward altogether. So I'm super happy to answer any questions and tell you any more about SHIOS or anything else that you want to know, but it's been really great to be here, and thank you for having me. Yeah.
I have a couple questions. Let's start with the app you're coming out with. So it's I'm saying it's primarily so people can go from Ethereum to EOS, but what if you guys envision a world where it's almost like iOS, Android, maybe they want to develop, they want to be platform agnostic. So
yeah.
Develop and then just port over. How easy would it be just to port over updates one way or the other?
Yeah. So it's a really great question, and one we kind of thought about, and it's all going to be open source. I think the idea of a one-way switch is exciting, but I think what's actually going to be interesting is being able to port between different chains. And so I think it's something that we have on our list to investigate, and we hope that other people will kind of join that endeavor, and can kind of, we see the first release of it as a basic, and I think there's a ton of opportunity on top of that, like you say, to make things easier to port and to switch and to move around.
Can you talk about why you think projects want to switch from Ethereum to EOS?
Yeah. I mean, I think there are some fundamental differences in the blockchains. The lack of gas costs and prices on EOS compared to Ethereum are kind of the obvious one. And depending on the project, there are other issues: scalability, the speed of transactions, that many projects on Ethereum are currently struggling with. And Codex, which is my other business, is built on Ethereum, and our niche is really in high value, low volume transactions. So Ethereum for us is great. It's very reliable, and the costs aren't an impediment to adoption. But for other projects, they are, and they are really preventing the kind of widespread adoption of some of the apps that are built on Ethereum. And so I think it's an interesting opportunity for people to rethink what blockchain that they can use and experiment. And I think that we think about the app in a way that actually maybe not all projects want to port over, but enabling it to be done easily without huge investment in time and resources facilitates that decision to be made without needing to worry about kind of technological constraints of switching.
So it seems that EOS has several features which make it fundamentally different than other architecture systems. What opportunities do those unlock outside of the business world, in the political sphere or the social communication sphere, which haven't been able to be tapped into until now?
That's a really great question. And EOS is super unique in the way that it is governed and run as a blockchain. I think when you think outside of the business constraints, one of the things that there's a lot of discussion around is things like GDPR and right to privacy, and having kind of a governed blockchain, a blockchain that can exist with like true arbitration, I think may provide a mechanism for complying with things like that, or certainly providing the sort of right to be forgotten that I think is certainly a kind of political shift at the moment. I think there's a lot of thinking to be done around how that works in practice, but it certainly marks EOS out as different from a few other blockchains in that regard. And I think more generally it's a blockchain for whom like value is integral. The way that by its very nature of having to vote for the block producers, we are embedding values in the blockchain itself, and in the people who control it and who are running it for us. And I actually think that's really interesting, and a way that we can kind of promote and kind of push forward social and cultural change too.
We're almost a pilot.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I have a question. As far as the curriculum, so it's already tough for individuals to pick up how to code, let alone are you actually incorporating certain methodologies, certain concepts in regards to blockchain within the your courses, your curriculum, and if so, like what type of learning curves are your students kind of having in regards to that? Like, have you had to make any adjustments, or do you kind of stay true to your curriculum, so on and so forth?
Yeah. It's a really great question, and one that we're very much still in the experimenting phase of. The pilot program that launches next month will be the first time we've actually kind of run this. But we're doing it in conjunction with programs that have run teaching courses for young people for a long time. So they have a lot of awareness about this. We're really keen to make sure that it is complementary to the blockchain sphere. And so as we progress, the current program is kind of designed probably for age 13 to 15, so it's pretty young. It's a real introductory course for people. But as we progress, the intention is that it should be kind of focused on blockchain development. And so over time, I think it will change a lot, and as we learn how to do that. But one of the things that we have really been thinking about and are keen to implement is this idea of more holistic awareness, and of mindfulness, and of why we're creating what we're creating and the impact of what we're creating. Because I think I personally, and SHIOS, I think I can probably speak for the rest of the SHIOS community, we're all believers that diversity is great when it comes to building technology. Because technology built by a single homogeneous group of people inherits the biases of that single homogeneous group of people. There are tons of examples, notably in like AI and things like that, where there's just like insane levels of biases that are inherited by those technologies. and diversity of background, of gender, of education, of geography, of political beliefs, of all of those things are a way to ensure that we can build technologies that actually work for everybody. And it's super important. And I do a lot of work with artists to encourage them to get involved with technological development, because I personally believe that artists have this insane privileged position in society to be able to critique and batter around and question decisions that people make. And so I think just encouraging diversity is super important, and questioning why we're doing things is really important. Whether we're making a particular decision because we personally think it's a good idea, or whether we're making a particular decision because we've actually thought about the implications of it. And so alongside the technical side of the education that we want to provide, we're really keen on incorporating this kind of critical thinking and mindfulness and awareness alongside that too.
Could you tell us more about non-fungible tokens, and we'd love to hear more about it.
Yeah. So my work with non-fungible tokens is primarily related to the Ethereum blockchain, not EOS at this stage. But non-fungible tokens, and I'll start from the beginning, so I apologize if this is just dull for some people in the room. When we think of a normal blockchain token and kind of cryptocurrency, like a Bitcoin or EOS or Ethereum, they're fungible. And by that we mean that one Bitcoin is the same as another. If I gave you one and you gave me another one, we'd still end up with one Bitcoin each, and we'd probably be pretty happy because they're the same. Non-fungible is the kind of word that's been adopted to describe unique tokens, where I have one non-fungible token and you have another, and if we swap them, they're not the same. We don't have the same thing at the end of the day. And it's a relatively new concept, even in the new sphere of blockchains. The word non-fungible kind of first came into use when CryptoKitties became popular in like November last year. And for those of you who don't know CryptoKitties, it's a game of digital blockchain-based cats that can be traded and breed with each other to make more blockchain-based cats, which may sound crazy, but is one of the highest uses of blockchain, and I think is actually, I'm a big fan of, because I think it has been responsible for driving the blockchain space as a whole forward and encouraging more people to understand and use the kind of technology. And so these non-fungible tokens are actually kind of super exciting. And the reason that I think they're exciting is not just because you can have something unique that exists on a blockchain, which I do think is exciting, particularly in the context of art and things like that, but this idea that you can now represent unique assets easily using blockchain has pretty broad-reaching implications for finance, for how a lot of transaction businesses take place, for legal contracts. So at Codex, we use non-fungible tokens to represent physical assets. We're mainly focused on like valuable collectibles, like art, and we work with auction houses and marketplaces who sell those items to create blockchain-based identities and records for those items that can be thought of like a certificate of authenticity, or a way of proving that something came from a particular artist. And so that's the context that we're using it. But I think there's really exciting applications in financial products. We were just discussing earlier this idea of the warranty that you get with your dishwasher. This is where my mind is at, because my dishwasher is currently breaking. But this idea that, and I went and had to dig out the paperwork to find out if my dishwasher was still in warranty. But this idea that like you could have a blockchain-based record for that. You could, to be able to prove the serial number, that it matched that your item was still in warranty, that nothing else had happened to it, that it was still in the same place. So many kind of things that you need for these very simple transactions, but that could actually really improve the way that we transact with each other. So I actually think non-fungibles are kind of a really exciting space. Yeah.
So I'm actually interested in, like, art is a very
Yeah, I think that digital collectibles themselves are a really interesting concept. And the reason that I think they're interesting is because I think that the way that we're all living is changing. Increasingly, we're becoming asset light. We don't stay in the same house for 30 years and amass a ton of stuff. We move around, and we don't like kind of owning a ton of stuff, I think, more and more. But that doesn't take away this idea that we love and appreciate beautiful objects and unique things and like that idea of collecting things. It's kind of part of human nature, I think, is to want to collect artifacts that represent our history, which I think is mostly what art is. It represents a point in time that we were feeling a particular thing or fell in love with a particular object, and that doesn't go away despite the fact that we maybe don't want to own so many objects anymore. And so this idea of digital collectibles, things that are really unique, is really being enabled by blockchain technology. When I'm talking to the art world about this, I kind of use the notion that previously digital art would have been a JPEG, and there's just nothing to stop me copying and pasting that JPEG 10,000 times, and who knows how many items there are around. But with blockchain, we can really prove that something is the unique one. It's the only or one of 10 objects available. And that's also something that we as humans like too. We like rarity. We like the idea that we're the only person who owns something, or that we are part of a group of people who own it. Not that something can be owned infinitely by everybody. There's a whole ton of questions around that, but that kind of just tends to be how we are. And so I think this idea of being able to own digital objects is something that more and more people are interested in, and is a way that creatives and artists, I think, are finding new collectors and new people who want to own their objects. People who maybe didn't want to buy a big canvas of something, but who are actually pretty excited to have something that is created by an artist that they can own digitally. And so I think it's just a really fascinating sphere. For Codex specifically, we have our primary kind of business partners are in the secondary market sphere. They're auction houses. And for them, the technology is really interesting about being able to prove where something came from. Being able to prove that it was actually sold by a particular auction house and not another auction house. And that it was verified by a particular expert, not another expert. And that kind of contributes a lot to the value that people ascribe to these items.
But do they want to, kind of have that much control, or have that much, like, for example, if I came in and I'm looking at this piece of art, you might give me a different price than Ingrid came in.
Right. Yeah, and so there's not necessarily pricing ascribed to it.
Okay.
In the way that the technology is built. More often because it's an auction house, and so the pricing is market determined when there's an auction anyway. But I think that there's super exciting applications, particularly in the primary market, which is the point at which an item is first sold. And there are some really cool projects. One of my favorite is a project called Dada, which is, do you know it? Yeah. It's a project which facilitates resale royalties to visual artists. Resale royalties. And what resale royalties are is probably kind of a bit of an anathema to you guys, because they don't really exist in the United States. But in Europe, and this has been going on for hundreds of years, when an item sells for the second time, so not from me as the artist to you, but when you sell it to Ingrid, the artist actually gets a tiny percentage of the profit that you make, and participates in the upside of the work that they create. And the reason for that is because artists actually drive their secondary market value. If I sell your work for $100 and then I go and become an accountant, my work probably isn't going to go up much in value. But your profit making is kind of dependent on me as an artist to have a successful career. And yet, most places around the world don't reward artists for that. And the artist sells their first piece of work for $100, and even if that work sells 20 years later for $3 million at an auction, they never see any of that. And what Dada is I think is so cool about the Dada platform is that there's secondary market resale royalty rights integrated with the sales contracts, so that the second time and the third time and the fourth time that a work sells, the artist benefits in a tiny way. It's a tiny percentage, but it's something. And I think it's a really kind of cool concept and a really great application of this technology to be able to implement automated payments to creatives. That's kind of one of the most exciting things that I think about in this sphere. I've also been very privileged to be part of a project which is not related to codecs, but is about cultural heritage protection. And in a politically unstable part of the world, we worked with several museums to record and document items using blockchain technology and some tagging technology, such that if those museums get looted and the items reappear on the international art market, we will know where they came from and be able to return them to the country of origin. So I think there's kind of several really exciting applications here for the cultural space. Yeah.
I was meeting with a client today at a university, and I was reminded of my university days where everything had a barcode on it. Like, the table had a barcode on it, the chair had a barcode on it, the computer had a barcode, all had a barcode on it. And so we have this kind of advent in our technology today that we have big things, pieces of artwork which are worth $3-5 million with a barcode on them, or the equivalent of it.
Yeah.
How long do you think it is? And we also have digital things having a barcode on it, digital assets that I might own. Do you think that we'll come to a point where when we walk down the street, we're going to be surrounded by everything down to my shoes having a barcode on it, which are all tracked in some larger database? And if so, what types of limitations do you think that puts on the human experience?
Do I think everything's going to be... I hope not everything's on the blockchain. I think there's some things where there's value to having records, and there's some things where there aren't. An expensive piece of art where you're probably going to resell it is a good example, because you need that documentation. You probably need to prove that you have the right import and export licenses for it and things like that. Your shoes, I think, is probably not so relevant. And if we're at the stage where we're having to maintain records of everything that we own, I think that probably has an impact on the way that we live our lives. And you have to think about incentives when you think about blockchain records. I do have an incentive to update and maintain records for expensive artworks. I don't have incentives to update and maintain records for my shoes, probably. And so how do you enforce that without it just becoming an encumbrance?
Well, I think there could definitely be, like, as a marketer, I could easily see reasons to keep that data available.
Yeah. Yeah, and I suspect that there may well be. I think there is actually a project in existence for sneakers on the blockchain. And so will more and more assets have a blockchain record? I think probably the answer is yes. Even when it comes to art, I always say that I actually think probably not all art is designed to be on the blockchain. There's a ton of art that happens and that is created that isn't designed for blockchain. It's designed to be performed in a particular moment, or it's designed to be an intimate connection between one person and another that doesn't require some documentation around it. And so I think when we're building this kind of technology and thinking about what we can apply it to, we have to think about whether it's actually needed and whether we really want everything to kind of have that history and that documentation.
So speaking of art, this is my last.
Do that one and then you.
You're working on, I couldn't find the article or the website, but Doge Bridge?
Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit more about that project? Kind of, I guess, help us understand what that's about.
Yes. So one of the other engagements that I'm really involved in is something that's called the Foundation for Art and Blockchain, which goes back to the point that I mentioned earlier around encouraging diversity in developing technology. And I set it up at the beginning of this year, and the mission is to encourage and help artists working with technology. And we link artists with blockchain projects and vice versa to change the way that we think about technology. And there are some insanely amazing artists who are really kind of pushing this space forward and are at the cutting edge of blockchain. And one of the projects that we've been involved in through the foundation is the Doge Ethereum bridge. And there's a little bit of a convoluted story behind it, but there's a project called TrueBit. TrueBit are interested in interoperability, and they won the first portion of a bounty, i.e. they were paid for kind of completing a problem, which is to build the software bridge between the Doge chain and the Ethereum chain, two different blockchains. And the guys at TrueBit donated their bounty, and they wanted to give their bounty back, and the bounty had kind of come from the community, and they wanted to give it back to the community in the form of art. So they hired an artist called Jessica Angel, who has spent many years working in networks and visualizing what computer systems and computer networks look like with visual arts. And she is responsible for building an artwork that is the Doge Ethereum bridge. And it was recently accepted into the Vancouver Biennale. It's going to open in May next year. And my involvement through the foundation and with Codex is that we're funding public programming of art within the physical space for a year in Vancouver. So artists are invited to submit proposals around work that is related to art and blockchain that will then be exhibited at the Vancouver Biennale through the Doge Ethereum bridge. I'm going to answer her and then you.
Hi, so you mentioned that girls are interested in technology around age 11 and 12, and then when they're 16 they lose interest in studies and socialization. It's not. You know what happens because it's kick in. And the girls lose interest in technology and get interested in boys. That's right. That is happening. I think as women, we have to stop from this nonsense that biologically we're the same as men, because we're not. Okay? And the first wave of feminism did terrible, terrible damage to women by insisting that we're exactly the same as men, because we're not. I come from a communist country. I grew up in communism, where government actually forced you as a woman to go to chemistry, physics, mathematics, and so on. Terrible consequences. We don't have engineers in Eastern Europe today. Same in China. In China they went as far as they even broke every neuron in every house in China. Do you have engineers in China? No female? No, we don't. They're all interested in beauty and cosmetics and so on and so on. So really what if we want to change or introduce technology to women, we have to first of all realize that women think differently than men. Okay? Men think in straight line, logical thinking. A to B becomes that's engineering. Women think in circles. Okay, go from A to Z, go, then go back to B and then continue. Okay? It's the circles. So it's a very different thinking. And for as long as we have a linear thinking in education applied both to women and men, we're going to have fiasco after fiasco after fiasco. We have to change, we have to separate schools. This is what it is, segregation. So make friends with that word, segregation. Make segregation of sexes. And circle has to be designed differently for girls, women, and different technologies.
Yeah. I mean, I certainly am not a proponent of forcing women to do anything, nor do I think that there's mutual exclusivity between being feminine and being involved in technology. I think both can coexist, and I love going to get my nails done and doing girly things and makeup as much as I love inventing and developing new technologies. I think they can coexist, and I think that's the thing that people miss right now. That's the thing that society misses, is that they either expect girls to be beautiful or they expect girls to be smart.
No,
and
expect them coexist, meaning separate but equal. Separate but equal. That is the goal. Okay? Because when we look at Eastern Europe and communism, it's a fiasco.
Yeah, and I certainly don't think that we should be enforced, or forcing girls to do anything, but it's about equal access to opportunity, and that's what we don't have right now. We don't have. I disagree, actually. I do for sure. Like, don't get me wrong. I'm a extremely privileged woman who's grown up in London and had totally equal access. But there are many, many girls around the world who don't. And they don't because their parents don't want them to do something, because their schools don't want them to do something, because society doesn't want them to do stuff, and they don't have equal access. They don't. And that's what has to change, is to give them opportunity.
Yes, now we're talking colonialization. You cannot go to other countries and change their culture. That's what the first colonizers did. We have to bring savages to the level of Europeans. We're not colonizing. Is colonization good or bad? If you're saying colonization is evil, you have no right to go to third world countries and change their culture and say, well, you're doing terrible things to women. No,
I don't think that's the same. I don't think it's the same.
That's not what they're doing. They're actually creating programs to give access, and they're actually supporting programs, or even if not, there's already programs in Africa and India and all these different countries that are trying to, within the culture, support the girls. And so this, to me, is just in one of many ways to support what is already happening within the communities, which women and girls are already asking for.
They're asking for them, and we are partnering with local endeavors. We are not.
Who's paying for it?
We are.
Exactly, colonization.
I can think they should pay for it. They're coming from a colonial country anyway. But
you're going back to the slogan of first colonizers, that people of color are white man's burden. It's exactly what it is. Now we're talking about white privilege. Just another way of saying white man's burden. So you have to realize, is colonization good or evil? I'm not saying evil.
I think you're making a lot of leaps and jumps, and I don't know if you have a good understanding of colonialism. I do. And so I think that what is really
come from this system that we admire here so much. So please do listen to us.
Right. I don't have a colonial place in a moment.
I think we'll take. I'm going to move to another question. And I think we can take this up maybe afterwards. But I'm going to move on right now.
Could you tell us about the SHIO scholarship program? Could you tell us more about that?
Yeah. So the SHIO scholarship program is designed to the SHIO scholarship program is designed to facilitate opportunities for girls who want to participate in technical education. We partner with local communities and organizations who are already facilitating those education programs to support girls through those programs financially, because many of them can't afford to, or because there are limited places on those programs at the moment, and we want to help them expand. And so the SHIO scholarship program is around that. I think we have a lot of thoughts about how it might develop, including the progression of girls as they go from young ages and all the way through. And I think that there's, as I said, this idea of kind of critical thinking around what we're building, and there's elements of mentorship and linking girls as they go through technical education and want to become entrepreneurs or want to move into businesses, and facilitating access to women and men who are already engaged in those spaces to facilitate them engaging with these technologies.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks.
So you're thinking about expanding to, like, you're in Detroit, 80-some-odd% black city. Definitely would need some type of, in regards to the educational aspect of it. There are organizations that have a focal point to help the inner city children learn how to code, specifically women of color. Not to say that, that would be, kind of an angle for SHIELS, but it could be a great opportunity for you to actually, lay your roots here. And if so, just, kind of seeing the founding team, have you thought about, and I know diversity of thought is definitely important, and your network kind of helps you put together the team that you trust, but like, how do you kind of incorporate diversity outside of what we were able to see here? Like, are you looking to kind of expand, I guess? I don't know.
Yeah, no, not at all. I think it's a great question. And to go back to what we were saying earlier, like, we don't know everything. We don't know how everything works. But there are some great projects that do, who are doing awesome work. We were talking earlier about Black Girls Code, and that's, I think, one of the most awesome organizations around. There's like another organization that's mainly European focused called She Codes. There's awesome projects who are already doing this stuff. And we aren't educators. We don't know how to teach people, but by partnering with people who can, we can try to make a difference. And so all of those kinds of organizations we're really, really interested in having conversations with and connecting with, and many of them we already have. And I think as SHIELS grows, the goal for us is not to have SHIELS branded education. The goal is just to provide these opportunities. And so if we can fund projects that are doing it already, and it means that they can expand their class size from 10 to 15, that's awesome.
Have you guys thought about widespread adoption, and if so, have you thought about what kind of strategy that could take place, or whatever your vision is?
Just of like the technology?
Yeah, for like the wider public to not just know about it, but use it.
Yeah.
And to use all these decentralized applications that are coming out, especially in EOS.
Yeah, I think adoption is the biggest problem at the moment for the blockchain space. Facilitating easy adoption is hard, and I actually don't think, when I said it's a big problem, I don't think it's necessarily a problem in the sense that that's all that's holding us back. Ultimately, many of these projects are still in very early stages and are experimental, so do we need like widespread adoption right now? Probably not. We need to test these and make them rigorous before we get widespread adoption. And so I think that's the first thing. But reaching wide-scale adoption is also a barrier to growth. And I personally think that user experience is one of the biggest barriers. Education around user experience. I recently wrote, and we're going to release it for SHIELS, a kind of guide from the basics of like online cybersecurity for people who are engaging with blockchain technologies. I'm amazed at the people who are already in the space and who've been working in blockchain and who own cryptocurrency, who don't have like basic security precautions on their devices or the way that they interact with this technology. Even some, I've seen some people who are like super well known in this space who have like just really obvious security flaws in how they operate. And so that I think is a big barrier. Crypto assets, unlike the assets that we have in our bank, we actually have custody of, and that means that we can lose them and we don't have any recourse to people. And so if we as a blockchain community are encouraging that adoption, we also need to educate people on how to manage that and how to do that safely, how to exist online in a safe way. And at the moment, most people have no awareness of that. security breaches, even in centralized companies, like we're all victim to all the time. I had my financial details stolen by British Airways, like one of the most reputable airlines the other day. That had a huge breach. And so educating people around just basic online security and how to operate, I think, is the first step. And at the same time, making things easier, making that user experience easier. I often say, like, I'm a big believer that probably we'll know that blockchain is kind of real and has made it when we're all using it and we're not talking about it. Like, the goal should be that we're not talking about it. The goal, you know, lots of people want to talk about it and it's kind of fun and I love talking about it, but, you know, I take an Uber home and I maybe order some online food, and on the way I read my emails, and at like no point during that journey have I thought about the way that the internet works. Like, it's dumb. And I think blockchain will get to that stage, but we need to make it that. We need to stop talking about it in terms of getting people to use blockchain. We need to start talking about it in the way that we're solving real problems, and people want to use that application because it's solving a problem, not because they're using blockchain. And so I think that, you know, some of the most cool advances in this space are coming not by projects who are branding themselves blockchain projects, but by people who are just solving problems. And that's how this space is going to grow.
I think that that's a really great approach. I think one of the things that we're in conversation now is about how much digital literacy. We talk about digital literacy, but it's like, how much does someone really need to know in order to function, and then maybe spark interest if they want to go further, but then don't feel the pressure that they have to go any further, right?
Yes.
So it's finding that middle ground, and since for so long tech guys have been talking and explaining blockchain technology, confusing everyone in that process because they over-talk, you know, they sell too much information. Nobody needs to know about the RAM, like, so, like, just, you know, how do we bring it down to...
And that's why I love things like CryptoKitties. Like, they get tons of hassle because they're not truly decentralized, or they have something, whatever. Like, I think it's awesome. And the reason I think it's awesome is because last year I gave, like, my mom and my dad and my aunt a CryptoKitty for Christmas, and they love it. And they now know how to use it, and they can log into CryptoKitties. And, like, they're engaging with this thing, and they think it's kind of fun because it's a game, not because it's blockchain. And so whether it's gaming or whether it's art or whether it's whatever, people are now beginning to engage with stuff not because it's blockchain, but because either they like it or it's useful. And that's what's kind of cool. And as in any sense, as we move forward, that level of digital literacy changes, because you probably need a higher level right now, and over time the level that you require will go down. But it's about primarily, I think, making sure that people can be safe, and that people have the knowledge that they need if they want to start engaging with this, to be able to do that safely, for their, like, personal safety and their financial safety and everything else that's related to that.
Are there any other dApps that Shios is building? Is there like a chat app too, right?
So Sense, which is Crystal's business, is a social network business, and that is now on EOS. So you can use Sense. And there are a couple of other projects that we're in the pipeline that we are that are on their way. Yeah, but Sense is out there. It's awesome. It's, you know, Crystal's been working on Sense for a very long time, and it's a really great application, and it's now on EOS. And yeah, there's a few more things.
It's live now too? Cool.
For your Black producer candidate, what's the route you guys are taking to try to move up that chain to actual Black producer status?
You know, I think for us, we are very focused on, like, not buying votes, not coming to agreements with other people about who will vote for who. I think we take a pretty long-term outlook that block producers who can prove that they have good infrastructure and can uphold the integrity of the system and can really deliver on what they say they're delivering, can encourage adoption of EOS through applications or in other ways, and who can really kind of facilitate the growth of the community will over time move up. And there are other block producers who don't have that approach and they take different courses of action, but I think we are focused on doing what we say we're going to do and on delivering adoption applications, this SHIELD scholarship, and on spreading the EOS word.
Awesome. Great. Well, thank you so much, Jess, for coming.
Thank you very much for having me.
And we can find out more about SHIELD on shios.io.
shios.org.
.org.
Yeah.
And the foundation information is on there as
It's
well.
all on there too. Yeah.
Dope. And you can find out more about EOS Detroit at eosdetroit.io. We have Steve Floyd coming on Tuesday if you want to come out again. He's from EOS Tribe. And make sure you sign in if you're not already on the newsletter list. We really appreciate it if you sign up, and we can keep you informed about what's going on in EOS and EOS Detroit. We're going to dinner at Vicente's. Everyone's welcome to join us if you want to walk around the corner and have cocktails and eat Cuban food. Thank you again, Jess, for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, everyone, for coming.